I'm pleased to introduce CSBS President and CEO Jim Cooper, a position that Jim has held since June 2022. Previously, Jim served as Executive Vice President of Policy and Supervision, and then Senior Vice President of Policy at the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. He is also the former Deputy Director at the Indiana Department of Financial Institutions. Jim is going to wrap up this year's conference. He's going to offer some closing thoughts, and he is also going to announce the winner of the 2023 John W. Ryan Award for Most Significant Contribution to Community Banking Research. So, Jim?
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that kind introduction there. And thank you to everyone that has stayed to the end. I have an idea that some of you may be here to see the presentation of the John W. Ryan Award for the best research, so we're all looking forward to that. But before I announce the winner, I want to take a few minutes to share my thoughts on this event and offer some ideas for further exploration. And I want to start by thanking the Research Conference Planning Committee from the Federal Reserve, the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, and the FDIC. This conference plays an important role and is unique. There's none other like it, I think. And I know the Planning Committee and others have been at work since January to put everything in place. I especially want to thank our fearless leader, Jim Fuchs, for his tireless effort heading up the conference. And also all the research and work that is done behind the scene on selecting the papers that are presented. I want to acknowledge from the Planning Committee John Kandrak, who I see as over here now, and Smith Williams and Blake Marsh all play a huge role in curating the research that makes this conference so valuable. So thank you, John and team, for worrying about the math so that we don't have to here at the conference. So I think that's a very, very important thing. Carl White, I know this is a big lift for the Reserve Bank. Thank you for hosting, and then thank you to the really exceptional staff you have here, the event staff at the St. Louis Fed, that makes this all possible. It's really a tribute to your team and your organization. I've really enjoyed all the sessions here this week. I think it's been great. But I want to call out the panelists to the last session here. Andy, Brenda, Skip, and Jeff. I think in your keynote really gave us insight into how community banks can evolve their business models, and I hope that everyone was listening. Will consider ways to help community banks overcome potential challenges. And challenges to their success. We've learned over the past 2 days about credit risk, the impact of extreme weather events, bank runs, and bankers, regulators, and policymakers have been dealing with a lot of these issues and risks for decades. The research from this conference builds on the anecdotal evidence to develop empirical findings that can drive changes in policy, and that's important. That's really the value of this conference, I think. During the great financial crisis, we realized that policymakers didn't really have enough empirical data and research on the value of community banks. I think this conference has really elevated the data and research on community banks so that we can have better informed policy. It isn't just an academic conference or a community bank summit or a regulatory briefing. We bring all three sectors together, and the engagement between the academics and bank discussants brings to light the issues that we need to consider and issues that I think otherwise would be unexplored. So that's really, really important. And I think if we track back The research that's emerged from this conference has helped to tailor regulation for community banks. Recent events could cause the pendulum to swing back. The financial system was stressed earlier this year with the sudden closure of some regional banks. Regulators and policymakers are at risk of overreacting to these types of unanticipated events and over-indexing on the likelihood of those events recurring. The downstream impact of potential regulatory overreaction is very much on the minds of community bankers. They've voiced their concern about regulatory burden in our annual survey of community banks. We've seen that same concern echoed in the CSBS Community Bank Sentiment Index, which we actually launched at this conference in 2019. In the past year, the Sentiment Index has seen a marked drop as respondents share their concerns about rising interest rates, regulatory burden, and general economic conditions. CSBS is going to release the third quarter results next week, and while community bank sentiment has improved slightly, it's still not positive, and the concerns about regulatory burden remain. The fact that community bankers are consistently expressing this concern warrants our attention. Community banks make more than half of all small loans to businesses and 2/3 of commercial bank agricultural loans. They support small business development, job creation, and local communities. And we heard that in spades here from the panelists. We need to continue to find ways to tailor regulation to ensure safety and soundness, but still allow for the economic growth that makes the U.S. economy the envy of the world. So where does that leave us? In times like these, research and data are even more important. It's not enough to repeat and reaffirm what we all know to be true. We need to continue to come away with real solutions. As we look to next year, I see 3 areas that could benefit from both research and policy engagement. First, we need to recognize that community banks themselves are small businesses and understand that regulations can accumulate to a weight that is unbearable. When we started this conference, there were 5,000 state-chartered community banks in the nation. Today, that number has dropped by 30%, a little over 11 years. We can't have a 2-tiered system with some banks too big to fail and others too small to succeed. Second, and I think, Jeff, you nailed this one, we need a thorough analysis of the barriers to entry in the banking industry. There have only been 53 new community banks in the past 11 years. We need to investigate ways to encourage and not stifle new entrants. We can't sustain the losses of community banks without new entrants. And I think, Jeff, you called them endangered species. And I think, once they're gone, they're gone. And I think we will not be able to bring them back. So it's critical that we stop that decline. And finally, we need to make sure that we're not driving new products and services away from depository institutions. Bank regulation has become much more complex and homogenized in recent years, which appears to favor the large and impede the small. Historically, states have served as laboratories for innovation. State legislatures, through a democratic process, authorize new powers and products for banks doing business in their state. But today, new or novel activities authorized by states are often stifled at the national level before they're proven at the local level. We need to recognize and value the diversity enabled by our dual banking system and recognize the diversity that state regulators bring to these discussions. We don't encourage innovation within the banking system, these new products and services will go somewhere else. As a career state regulator before I joined CSBS, I can attest that community banks are the lifeblood of their local economies and to their communities. I encourage more research into these three areas to enable a healthy and innovative community banking sector. With that, I'm now going to announce the winner of the second annual John W. Ryan Award for the most significant contribution to community bank research at this conference. John, if any of you knew him, was a true force behind this conference. We miss him, but he was a tremendous champion of the dual banking system and community banks. Selecting the winner was not easy with so many great papers, but I'm delighted to share that the award goes to Siddharth Vij, University of Chicago, and Joseph Komenovitz from the University of Rochester for their paper, Regulatory Risk Perception and Small Business Lending. And if you'd come down. So, you tell I'm not very good with photo opportunities. Thank you, Siddharth. But their research shows how the misperception of risk by regulators, even if unfounded, can negatively impact the ability of small businesses to access credit. And that's an important finding and something that we need to reconcile. And I came away with a new term in irrational risk salience. So I will work on that in the future. But again, congratulations, Siddharth. Pleased to be here. And Jim, back to you. And I want to just thank everyone for being here. So,
Jim. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.